Years ago, I taught a course at UCLA and at USC. Yes, I'm one of the few adjunct professors who was able to teach at both schools at the same time and still live to tell the tale. But the point here is that one of my guests was a client of mine who, when he was developing his business, looked at what it would cost him to produce his product, and then looked at the marketplace to see if he thought he could produce enough revenue to match the costs of the product. If he was short on the revenue, he went back to the cost side and asked himself, what could he do to reduce the cost? And he went back and forth this way over and over again until he was able to at least come to a break-even point in his own mind, and then shave the cost a little bit more so that he could have a reasonable profit. I was the counterpoint to our discussion because in my own approach, I almost ignore the cost and I focus on the revenue. How much revenue can I bring in? If I can bring in enough revenue, whatever that word enough means, then I know I can produce it at a cost that's less than the revenue I bring in. So this is the compensation model that faces law firms today. The problem is, with most law firms, they don't understand what their cost is. The problem is that you think you need to live in a certain fashion, and you get an office suite, for example, in a good part of town, without thinking about A, what it's going to cost you, B, who are the clients that you're going to appeal to, and what's their perspective of your space, your prospective space. Do they need such fancy digs? Could they still be satisfied coming into your office where, if you're in another location, another part of the city that's not quite, you know, the Manhattan or the Beverly Hills Rodeo Drive of your particular city? These are things you've got to think about before you engage a particular space. Another aspect is, and I've mentioned this on other occasions, can you work out of an office virtually? In other words, can you work out of your own home in a separate office environment and have like a barrister or Fijian suite, an office suite, where you go to from time to time and therefore pay significantly less money when the time arises that you have to meet a client and you don't want to meet them in your home, obviously. So these are things you have to think about in the development of the compensation model. You would be well served to understand what your costs are before you actually move forward. Again, this is an element of planning. Make sure that those costs are low enough so that the revenue, which is less certain than it's ever been in our history, can cover those costs at the very least and give you enough left over to put food on the table and a roof over your head. Some time ago, I was called in by a lawyer who said that his compensation level, his cash flow, was significantly less than what he needed in order to live on. And I asked him what it was that he was spending his money on personally, and he told me. And I am here to tell you that he was living a lifestyle that was probably 3 times the revenue that he was bringing in. And he was bringing in a good revenue. Now, more than 50% of the lawyers in this country are earning less than $100,000. That's not a lot of money. And yet this particular client was earning more than that and still could not make ends meet at the personal level. My point is that you cannot allow your personal living standard or even your professional office living standard exceed the amount of money that you can reasonably count on. Be careful. Don't get yourself into that bind, because when you do, stress goes up significantly, personal relationships become at risk, and it is at that point that your own personal health begins to suffer. Life is good. You are a caring and helping provider of important services to our client community, the American public. Be sure you approach that task with a clear mind, not befuddled by economic pressure that you yourself create. Thanks for joining us. This is Ed Pohl again on the road.